Let's go with a reaction video. And I'm going to try to do it in the most authentic way possible. Because it's true that I've seen this guy, Fofana, Sherif Fofana, from Real Madrid's youth academy, the one everyone is talking about. I've seen him a little, but what I haven't read yet is the report that Marca won about Asensio, and something that apparently in the Real Madrid locker room has blown up, his relationship with Arbeloa. And that news about the fake watches and something about Carvajal and other players. But, well, there are people who have really emphasized Carvajal's name to do as much damage as possible because, of course, he's the most famous of all of them. He also brought it up a bit to get out of this loop about the match against Valle. Well, you have the videos, yesterday's reaction in the post-match live stream, the morning video. Tonight we'll do a post-match show for Atleti Barça or Barça Atleti. And also for Liverpool versus Paris Saint-Germain. Would we face either of these last two? Yes, if we win at the Allianz Arena, because there's no other option for us but to win there. Like I said, there'll be time to talk about that. So to move away from the Champions League topic for a bit today in this video, we're going to react to these things. Let's start with something pleasant about this guy, naturally, right? You've probably already seen footage of this guy. Jugaron el Real Madrid's reserve team against Manchester United's reserve team at Old Trafford. And the kid had a really impressive performance. From what I've seen, I was pleasantly surprised. I had already heard his name. I had seen 2 or 3 things about him in Real Madrid's youth academy. But wow, what happened yesterday is something else. There's a highlight there, just a short one, good for people who know what to look for and can quickly assess talented players. Yes, and for those who are going to make it and those who might not, I think this kid will catch your eye because, like I said, he has some really interesting qualities for someone who's just 16. He was born on November 20, 2009, man. He plays with, yes, for now he plays for Spain, but he could also play for Senegal and for Mali and for Equatorial Guinea. Top prospect? Some people might think because of the type of player that Madrid already has, and that's something people have already been saying. And I'll make a brief aside here. He's only 16 years old, and the way Real Madrid treats its youth academy, the way they take care of it. Except for the extreme case of Thiago Pitarco, who at 18 is already playing for the first team in Champions League matches against Bayern. This won't be fully developed until he's, I think, 19 or 20, but I hope he gets there sooner. Because also physically, the kid, I think he looks older than he is, and technically he's a very interesting player. But I understand those who say we don't need these midfielders because we're already a bit tired of them. Of the Camavingas, of the Tchouaménis, and so on, even though for me, Tchouaméni is doing very well. Although yesterday he had a rather strange play with Güler. Güler was clearly open for the pass, but Tchouaméni took too long to see it. Well, details about Tchouaméni, that's just how he is. I mean, Tchouaméni is a footballer, right? We're going to miss him at the Allianz Arena. And for me, that's a very important loss. We can discuss that later. Let's see who replaces him. I'm just not convinced about Camavinga. But Tchouaméni, who's worth his weight in gold for certain things, winning the ball back, covering, he's a very important guy for this Real Madrid. The question is, if we took a step forward, raised the level, would he be our midfielder? Would Tchouaméni be our central midfielder? And then things he still needs to work on, like turning more quickly. I mean, there are things where, well, the Frenchman just doesn't quite. But right now, I won't blame him. I won't criticize him. And look, I've criticized him in other situations and at other times. But I think he took a step forward at Real Madrid to be right now one of the most outstanding players on his team. So much so that if he's missing, you really feel that loss. I mean, today everyone agrees that it's a huge loss, besides being unfair, because what he did wasn't worthy of a yellow card. But, well, thinking about the future, and especially about this opinion that many people have, like, no, we don't need players of this type. Well, from what I've seen of this guy, is that, for example, when it comes to turning, he turns much better than Tchouaméni. And that's already something important, because for me, a midfielder has to have, one of the main qualities for me has to be that being very versatile in those kinds of situations, beyond just having good ball striking or being good at sliding tackles and intercepting a lot of balls, being a reference for his teammates, providing good coverage, being solid defensively, and being able to adapt to the center back position when the game calls for it. Well, damn, you need a kid who, look, turns really well, controls the ball really well. He had several moments like these in yesterday's game. These are like in the juvenile B. Here you can't see them as well, but anyway, as I said, he protects the ball really well. Turns, you see. That kind of movement is what I like the most. For example, about Thiago Pitar, who also does them really well. Manuel Angel, it's something that in certain players, well, I don't see it. And I think, fortunately, and we've mentioned it in more than one video, there's a generation of players coming up behind. The thing is, they're all very young. Palacios, he has a great first touch and control, and he turns really well too. Not to mention Manuel Angel Pita. We're seeing him, even though yesterday's game wasn't one of Pita's best. I would put him back there in Munich, by the way. But yes, they're coming in, but also there are players coming in who know how to do this very well. And this one also, on top of that, he has a very interesting physical presence. These are some of the things he did yesterday. I don't think I can show them all because I don't know if there are copyright issues and so on. But anyway, I'll show a few. I'll cut them a bit. You see this one, how he moves, how he takes charge, how he protects the ball. Here he hasn't really done much either. Let me see if there's something interesting around here that I remember here, for example. In these two, I mean, not just also when recovering the ball. Look here. Well, he has some very interesting things. No, I don't think I can show everything, okay? But anyway, you have it there on X, you have it on social media, the full video, it's 4 minutes long. You'll get tired of watching the kid, and you'll see that there's a very interesting prospect there. We'll see. We'll see when he's ready to play for Madrid. But knowing the academy and the club's youth policy, he still has a long way to go. And they're going to tell you, no, anyway, it's a project. I don't know what, that you can't burn them out so soon and so on. Well, that always depends on the club's level of need from a sporting point of view and above all from an economic point of view. Since Real Madrid, in theory, doesn't have the latter. So it just takes them longer to arrive, right? Okay, I want to react to this. I haven't read anything yet. I know there was a problem, or Marca says it's a Marca insider report. Okay? I don't want you to always say in the comments not to believe them. It's just daily news from Marca. Let's react to it, and let's, as I always say, take it with a grain of salt. The silent disappearance of Asensio ended with the center-back apologizing to his teammates. A disagreement with Arbeloa was the reason for his sudden and prolonged absence from the squad lists. He says, Marca insider report, if it's signed, it's basically signed by nobody. This reminds me of Nico Williams and Real Madrid, right? No one was signing, and Marca blatantly lied. You also need to keep these details in mind. He says, on March 11th, the Asensio case quietly failed. The center-back was dropped from the starting 11 against City, and Arbeloa's decision didn't sit well with the player, who would end up confronting the coach about it a few days later. Asensio's effort to be fit for the Celta match 3 days before the Champions League match deserved a starting spot, but Arbeloa gave it to Hausen against City instead. To Vigo, Madrid arrived with a broken central defense. Militao and Alaba were injured, and Hausen was suspended. Asensio had a severe neck contusion that he sustained against Benfica, but he toughed it out, as he did with the fracture. With that tibia fracture, he took a big risk for the team and made himself available for the match at Balaidos with Rudiger. However, the homegrown player stayed on the bench and didn't play against City. A small note should be made here. It's true, Asensio made a great effort during those days with 2 consecutive injuries. First the tibia injury and then this one, to somehow make up for the lack of defenders at that time. He says the tension between the player and the coach would escalate days later after being benched against City. Asensio was going to start against Elche. However, on the same day of the match, shortly before the team's usual morning activation session, Asensio showed up in Arbeloa's office accompanied by a doctor. He told the coach he had mild muscle discomfort and didn't feel fit to play. This was a situation that Arbeloa didn't like at all. The player's anger over being left out of the starting 11 against City was now compounded by some last-minute discomfort. The tension was obvious in that face-to-face, even more so when Arbeloa told Rudiger, who wasn't expecting to play because he was going to rest with the return leg against City at the Etihad in mind, that he had to play against Elche. Militao and Alaba were still injured. He tells the German, hey, you have to play. And he wasn't going to play because he was supposed to rest for the Champions League match. A change of plans that made the German uncomfortable since he's extremely strict with his planning, and for good reason, because Rudiger has been dealing with those physical problems lately and needs to be rotated. He needs to take care of himself, he says. And with his match preparation protocol, jumping into the game at the last minute didn't sit well with Antonio, especially because it meant pushing himself much more than advisable given his physical condition or his physical circumstances. Arbeloa and he are carefully managing his workload, and this blew all of that up because of the risk they believed it involved. Asensio was moving between Arbeloa's office and the locker room. Asensio was left out of the squad against Elche. He didn't travel to Manchester either, and he would miss the derby as well. All of this despite training normally every day. Asensio was training, and if it's just because he said, yeah, you didn't appreciate me here, so now I'm going to screw you over, then that's the reason. If this is true, come on, it's childish, a terrible act of immaturity. Asensio says he was training, but when the matches came, he was left out of the squad. The reason? He hadn't apologized to the team for criticizing Arbeloa's decision to bench him against City. The coach is very strict about discipline. Just ask Trent, who was benched in the derby for being late. And not only that, he considers them a locker room issue, not something personal between player and coach. Asensio had apologized to Arbeloa, but the coach asked him to do it in front of the group. Until he did, he wouldn't be called up. I like this because of Arbeloa's personality and, hey, the toughness with which, in my opinion, you always have to handle these situations when a player tries to step out of line. But the question is, would he have done it to someone else? They say he did it to Alexander-Arnold, but what about Mbappe and Vinicius? Careful, huh? Careful, because, of course, being tough with the weak and weak with the strong is not the best approach. But anyway, I'm just putting it out there if all of this is true, of course. And if one day they do it to one of these guys, let's see if Arbeloa acts the same way. The situation dragged on longer than expected because Asensio didn't think he needed to apologize to his teammates and didn't do it at first. Does anyone have anything to say? Arbeloa asked at the end of one of the huddles before a training session to give Asensio a chance to apologize. The center-back lowered his head and didn't say anything. Without an apology, he was left out of the squad again and again. The problem is that Asensio's absence started to be linked on social media to his nightlife. Remember when they used to say there was a footballer who had an active nightlife and all that? The attention shifted to an alleged lack of professionalism, and the rumor had to be stopped. Asensio knew his unusual case was already public, and after the break, people would closely watch to see if he rejoined the squad. He chose to resolve the issue and apologize to the locker room for what happened with Arbeloa after the City match. Following his last-minute absence against Elche and subsequent apology, Asensio was back on the squad list for Mallorca and Bayern. However, in both matches, he didn't get any playing time. End of the saga. Well, the way it's told, knowing how locker rooms work, there's nothing in this information that seems off to me. I told you I was going to react to it without having read it before. I hadn't read it before. I knew there had been some problem, but not the nuances or the details of this. And to me, it doesn't seem like a made-up story at all. It makes sense to me. It makes sense. Whether it's true or not is another thing. Well, let's move on to the next thing. This was reported today. Andorra is investigating the purchase of high-end watches by top international soccer players as alleged smuggling. At least Marca headlines it this way, and the subtitle is News Previously Reported by El Mundo, which includes the names of very famous clients. At least Marca headlines it this way. Because I saw this on El Diario Reyes, Carvajal, David Silva, and a few others have done this. El Diario Reyes, why are they doing that with Carvajal? What agenda is El Diario Reyes pushing, and what kind of newspaper is it? They have it in for people like Carvajal, people like Rafa Nadal, but not for any particular reason, just because they don't think like them or they don't consider them right-wing. These days, people quickly label others as right-wing, often targeting them for it. Carvajal, because he didn't greet Pedro Sanchez back in the day. And for El Diario Reyes, that's a very serious thing, right? So yes, he greeted him, but just shook his hand carelessly and didn't look at him, right? Because he did greet him. I think I remember he shook his hand. Actually, I'm not sure. The thing is, anyway, I'm not going to keep going on that topic, but you get what I mean, right? And that's why they've tried to go after the Real Madrid player. Andorra is probing alleged smuggling of luxury watches sold to first division football players. The investigations by the Andorran justice system are directed against a company in the Principality called Best in Associados, which was engaged in selling top brand watches without paying the required taxes. Well, if it's in Andorra, well. The Andorran authorities have concluded that the activity was criminal and the investigation is ongoing. Well, if they consider it criminal, okay. List of clients with criminal names. Madrid and other cities in Spain, and among the list of clients of this company are Sevilla player Cesar Azpilicueta, Real Oviedo footballer Santi Cazorla, Dani Carvajal from Real Madrid, and former player David Silva. All of them have a very good reputation, by the way. Both Azpilicueta, Santi Cazorla, and David Silva, all of them get very good press. Not really Carvajal anymore, for the reasons we discussed. The judge has asked Spain to help question the investigated residents, including the footballers who bought the watches and 7 people or Spanish firms that sold them to the Andorran company, which then resold them to the players. The last person under investigation is a woman who bought a watch from the firm, although 3 days later she was refunded the 79,000 euros she had paid. This investigation is ongoing, although Andorra is expected to soon begin taking statements from everyone involved to clarify the facts. The account of some of the soccer players, or the accounts who were implicated by this client, who, after negotiating with Diego GC's Andorran company, and he would, implicated in this case, is that after negotiating with this man's Andorran company, he would take care of the unpaid VAT on the purchase of the watch. The businessman admitted his responsibility for not declaring or paying the VAT on the import at the Spanish customs. Let's see. What I understand from this is that this guy would convince the soccer players and say, hey, I sell watches, you save on the VAT. I mean, they're going to cost you, they're still very expensive anyway, people who can afford it, but you save the VAT because I do it through Andorra, blah, blah, blah. Or the guy tricked them, as I understand it. He tricked the soccer players. Now, as they say, not knowing the law doesn't exempt you from following it. Maybe these soccer players will be held responsible for something, since some guy promises you things. But of course, it's like if, I don't know, someone else convinces you to do something that's not allowed by law, and you go and do it. So the other person, the one who tricked you, has more responsibility, but you might still have some too. I understand it must be something like that, but of course, the way it's told in other media, Dani Carvajal smuggled watches, or as if he had traded with them himself. Well, damn, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? But anyway, I get that it must be like that. He convinced them, they bought it. Oh, you don't have to pay VAT. Well, that's great. That's wonderful. And then it turns out the other guy was a criminal. Well, allegedly, right? Allegedly. Let's see what the courts say. I imagine that if they have any responsibility, I guess it would be to return the money, or not return it, but pay a fine. And that's it. That's what I understand. Well, that's a bit of what's been going on today. Hope you all have a great day. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel. Please start sharing. And about this, which some of you might have been watching, right? Nara Alvarez and Shakira's underwear. We're not going to comment on that because obviously, well, no. Well, I shouldn't do it, but I just realized that I've had that story up this whole time. That story where I'm like, what could this be, man? What could it be? Oh my God. Anyway, that's it. Clickbait, right? We resisted temptation. See you next time after the Atleti versus Barca and Liverpool versus Paris Saint-Germain Champions League matches. Bye.